Hello, this is Bryan Fulford with your BCSN SportsWrap midweek report, and we've got week number 11 coming up this upcoming weekend. We've got some pivotal games to end the Division II regular season, not only in the SIAC, which technically you could say have championship games, not only in the SIAC East, but also in the West. Over on the East side, you've got Albany State taking on Fort Valley State. The winner will advance to the championship game. Of course, we want to shout out Savannah State, who probably we will say is the unofficial champion of the SIAC East, as they went undefeated, beating every team in the East, but unfortunately they are not eligible to play in the championship game. Having beaten both Albany State and Fort Valley State, I think it's only fair that we give them a shout out, and we'll call it what it is, and we'll say they are the official SIAC East champion. Over on the west side, you've got essentially a rematch of last year. And if you listen to our podcast, AD brought up a great point. The Tuskegee Miles game, which last year it was Miles hosting Tuskegee. And basically, of course, Miles was on that great run at the end of the season, needing to win that game, or actually really having an opportunity to host and advance to the SIAC championship, thanks to Tuskegee losing the week before to Central State on the road. Well, as AD pointed out, the roles were pretty much reversed this year, as it was Miles losing to Central State on the road, which opened the door for Tuskegee, who has now won 5 games in a row, including 4 conference games. And now it sets up for Tuskegee at home hosting Miles, and the winner will advance to the SIAC championship game. Unfortunately, this year, the West will not host this year. So sort of a bit of a role reversal from last year, and it'll be interesting. It is Tuskegee's homecoming, and I think they're the last school to have a homecoming, if I'm not mistaken. Most of the schools had their homecomings in October. So not only is it homecoming, but it's senior night, or senior day, and if you listen to our podcast, AD pointed out Tuskegee this year 3-1 in day games. So a lot of things leaning towards Tuskegee's side, but we'll have to wait to see how that plays out. Over in the CIAA, the last week of the regular season and the big matchup really involves the Southern Division. The North has already been decided by Bowie State, but over in the Southern Division, what you have staring at you is you have the matchup between Shaw and St. Augustine, and you also have the matchup between Fayetteville State and let me make sure I have it clear who Fayetteville State is playing. Come on, Bryan. I can't find it here. So unprepared. Sorry about that. Listening to this. Anyway, Fayetteville State plays. And if Fayetteville State wins this upcoming weekend, they are pretty much a guaranteed into the CIAA championship game. If they were to lose somehow, it opens the door for Shaw, who all Shaw has to do is beat St. Augustine, and then Shaw will get the bid into the CIAA. So that's unfortunately what happened when Shaw lost the other weekend to Central. I believe that was ECSU, I believe that's who they lost to. And it's Winston-Salem State. That's who Fayetteville State is playing, and that's in Winston-Salem State. And that won't be an easy game for Fayetteville State, because last year the Rams, put a beating on Fayetteville State. It was actually one of the more surprising games in Fayetteville State's season. They really had a great season last year. They were on a winning streak heading into the CIAA championship game, and then all of a sudden, I think the Rams put like 50 points on them. They beat them by like maybe 3 touchdowns. It was a very surprising ending to that game. And of course, then Fayetteville State had to go in to the championship game against Bowie, and they just they didn't stand a chance. And I don't know if it was the effects of that game against Winston-Salem State or it was just Bowie being a really good team last year. So that's what you have over in the Division II side. And, of course, we'll spotlight all 5 of those games as well as some games really over in the SWAC and the MEAC. The MEAC, really no major significant games heading into this weekend, in my opinion. The top teams all should be favored this weekend. Of course, I think on a bye, Florida A&M is on a bye this week, but Bethune-Cookman is hosting Delaware State, trying to lick their wounds off of losing to South Carolina State a couple of weeks ago. A&T is on the road in Baltimore at Morgan State. And South Carolina State is traveling up to Howard. A bit of a breaking news that came out this evening, and I'm recording this on a Wednesday. Howard suspending head coach Ron Prince after their investigation to player abuse allegations that surfaced maybe about 4 or 5 weeks ago. I think I saw that first reported by HBCU Game Day. Well, HBCU Digest has reported this evening, I think they were the first to break this, that Howard making a decision to suspend Ron Prince, which essentially is for the last 2 games of the season. Howard getting ready to travel down to Tallahassee next weekend to play Florida A&M, and this week they're traveling to South Carolina State. So, obviously I think I won't predict, but it just feels like the tea leaves or the writing on the wall just say that the Ron Prince era may be coming to a quick end at Howard University. I'd be very, very surprised if they make the decision to stick with Ron Prince. And just from the standpoint, I haven't read or seen very many positive stories coming out about Ron Prince or about Howard this season. It's just been one negative story after the next. Not how many people thought this season would go, given the number of players that receive preseason accolades back in the summer and in the preseason. So one other thing I wanted to do real quick in setting up this midseason report, and this podcast really, I've got a great opportunity to speak with Mo Carter. Mo is the sports director and anchor for WZDX in Huntsville, Alabama. And of course, they primarily cover, or they're in the backyard for the Alabama A&M Bulldogs. But of course, they cover all things Alabama up there, Alabama, Auburn, a few other schools up in their area. But as it relates, Mo he's a Southern University graduate, a former football player for Southern under Pete Richardson. And it's been really great following Mo. If you don't follow Mo on Twitter, you need to. He's at Mo Carter WZDX. That's his Twitter handle. But I love talking to people who cover black college football. Excuse me. It gives me a chance to not only kind of learn something, but I think they offer unique perspectives on doing what we're doing, which is just trying to bring more exposure and more light to this great product that we have. And it starts with football, and obviously right now the basketball season has just begun, and all of the NCAA sports. I think the NAIA schools started maybe a couple of weeks ahead, but it's great to get an opportunity to kind of speak to somebody like Mo, who's in a position like what he's in. He's been great. He's been a great follow, and he's tagged us in a lot of things. And so I just wanted to kind of speak with him, kind of show him some love and appreciation, and get a chance to get to kind of know him. So it's a great podcast. It's a great interview. I thought I had a great time talking to him. the great thing in talking with Mo, I feel like I could just kind of set up the questions and then he would just take off and run with it. And just so it's great. I thought it was a great listen. So we could have talked for almost 2 hours. We didn't. It's only probably an hour. So I apologize for those of you who were looking for a little short podcast maybe, or a little short intro, or, but this one's it's about an hour, but I think it's well worth listening to. And, Mo Carter is definitely one of the rising stars in sports media. And it's great that he has an affiliation with black colleges and black college athletics, because it helps to keep our brand and our product in the mix, as best as I could say it right there. So that'll be coming up here in just a second. And also make sure to check out AD's, my co-host, AD Drew. He just wrote an article with an updated predictions for the Division II playoffs. And also he had an interview with Dr. Alvin Parker of Virginia Union. And of course, Virginia Union about to take on a Virginia State in a big game upcoming. Somebody will actually be knocked out of the playoffs this upcoming weekend. I want you to check that out. Make sure to check out AD's podcast or his interview as well. The last thing I wanted to do is just give a shout out to some of the top performances from last week. As you remember, or maybe you didn't hear it, but we gave our top players of the weekend to the duo from Savannah State, Devon Gibbons and D'Angelo Durham. Devon Gibbons, the quarterback for Savannah State, threw 4 touchdown passes. He only completed 5 passes. He was 5 of 8, but he completed 4 of those completions for touchdowns. And then he turned around and ran 17 times for 145 yards and 2 more scores. For Durham, he ran 21 times for 148 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, those two guys they lit up the night and ate up the yards, and just the beating that they put on Fort Valley State was very shocking. I think it was like a 53-24 win. Very impressive game by those guys. And then Ladarius Skelton also, 238 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Then he passed for 2 more touchdowns with 198 yards, 4 touchdowns in total. In the win for Southern over Alabama A&M, a game that, hey, look, Alabama A&M could have very easily have gone up. At one point, they were up 3 points with maybe under 2 or 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and very well could have been up by a touchdown had it not been for a penalty that called back a score. And the Bulldogs ended up having to go for the field goal, and then that's when Southern, led by Skelton, ended up driving down the field and scoring a touchdown. And then Alabama A&M had another opportunity to potentially win the game. So a big win for Southern, no doubt. Those top performers, the top passers, you had Austin Hensley of West Virginia State, 55 pass attempts, just chucking it all over the field. He was 36 of 55. So not only did he have the most completions, but he had the most attempts. And he had the most yards, as he threw for 372. He had 2 touchdowns, but he also had 4 interceptions in West Virginia State's loss to Charleston. Akil Glass in Southern loss, in the Bulldogs loss to Southern, rather, he was 29 of 37, 356 yards, 4 touchdown passes, no interceptions. DeAndre Johnson of Texas Southern, another big performance. Unfortunately, it was in a loss. 21 of 40, 351 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. And the best production in a win, just pure passing now. Obviously, you had Devon Gibbons with 4 touchdowns. You had Ryan Stanley throw 4 touchdowns. Tariq McKenzie threw 4 touchdowns. But Jawan Carter of Norfolk State, 16 of 28, 314 yards, 3 touchdowns, one of them including an 80-yarder. So, and I mentioned Devon Gibbons earlier. So those were sort of the top passers. Top rushers from the past weekend, I mentioned Skelton, 238 was the high. He also had 34 attempts, which was the high. So very unusual that you see a quarterback with your leading rushing attempts and yardage. But then how about the number 2 guy, Jeremy Hickbottom of Grambling? 15 carries, 185 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He had touchdown runs of 73 and 67 yards. I'm calling it now. Grambling is the dark horse that people need to be aware of and stay awake on. They have won 4 games in a row, and they're causing havoc towards the end of the season, and they may somehow find their way into the SWAC championship game. Shy McKenzie of Hampton, 28 carries, 152 yards, and a score. Already mentioned D'Angelo Durham and Devon Gibbons for Savannah State. Top receivers from the past weekend, Xavier Smith with 4 touchdowns and 184 yards. He not only had the most touchdowns of any receiver, but he also had the most yards of any receiver. That's the Florida A&M receiver. He had 9 catches total. Isaiah Scott, though, West Virginia State, had 12 catches for 178 yards and a touchdown. And then Elijah Bell, the GOAT, with 11 receptions, 107 yards for North Carolina A&T in their win over South Carolina State last weekend. And also Donnie Corley, Texas Southern, 11 receptions, 170 yards, and 1 touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, one of our players of the week, of course, was Chester Hutcherson of Tuskegee with his 18-tackle performance in the game against Edward Waters, as well as Jalen Thomas of Miles, who had 14 tackles, 6 of them were solo, 4.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. Also, how about Darrell Nash of St. Aug and Dustin Crozier of West Virginia State? Each of those guys had 16 tackles. And on the interception side, how about Joseph McDaniels of Grambling? 2 interceptions in the ball game, and Dimitri Morcell of Bowie State also with 2, along with Devin Coles of Norfolk State. All right, enough of me. Coming up after this short little break, you're going to hear from my interview with Mo Carter of WZDX in Huntsville, Alabama. I appreciate you taking time to listen, and make sure to check us out on the Black College Sports Network, mybcsn.net, as well as find our Facebook page. And of course, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at mybcsn, the number 1. And that's going to be it. Later up this week, AD and I will get together for our week number 11 preview show. And we appreciate you listening, and I appreciate you listening to this particular podcast with Mo Carter. Coming up right after this break.
This December 21st, the best in HBCU football will collide in Atlanta at the Celebration Bowl. MEAC versus SWAC. Champion versus champion. Only one team will rise above the rest and claim the coveted Celebration Bowl trophy. Come join the celebration at Mercedes-Benz Stadium this December. For more information, visit thecelebrationbowl.com.
Hello, this is Bryan Fulford with the Black College Sports Network, and joining me on this special edition, this podcast version of the BCSN SportsWrap, I'm talking to Mo Carter, the sports director and anchor of WZDX Television in Huntsville, Alabama. Mo, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with me.
Hey, not a problem, Brian. I appreciate you having me on and whatnot. Also, I want to say kudos to you and your crew for doing the jobs you guys have been doing. I've been able to kind of pick up a lot of information from you guys, and you guys have probably been able to do the same for me.
Most definitely, man. That is we appreciate. That's humbling for for you to be able to, for you to say that, because I mean, we're out here we definitely don't have a major, television brand or market behind us. And even though we've been doing it for several years, it's been a grind and a passion. And so, someone in your position to constantly shout us out, tag us, and share information and the like, it's great. And, that's definitely appreciated. So and let me just let people know, those who are listening and you want to follow Mo on Twitter, it's at Mo Carter WZDX on Twitter. Are you active on like Facebook or Instagram if you want to shout those out as well?
Yes, sir. Not so much on Instagram, but my professional work page for Facebook is Mo Carter WZDX News. Honestly, if you follow Twitter, you kind of see some of the same things coming in on Facebook as well. From those, of course, like I said, majority of it is sports-related content, but it's content that, people want to see.
Right. And so before we get into talking about just your current role, let's kind of go back a little bit. And you're a former football player, defensive back, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you started your college career at Nicholls State and then transferred to Southern. Talk a little bit about what that experience was and just, how you came to Southern and maybe some differences that you appreciated coming from Nicholls State to Southern.
Okay, so I can actually take you all the way back to high school. So in high school, I was a two-time honorable mention All-State standout in both football and track. Had some interest from several folks, including Southern University. Early on, I actually committed to Southeastern Louisiana back when Hal Mumme was the head coach there. But then around somewhere in my senior year, he ended up leaving and taking his whole entire staff to New Mexico, if I'm not mistaken. So, they had a new crew there, and I kind of didn't know what was really going on at that point in time. So I kind of opened up recruitment and whatnot. But then it was kind of funny because, once National Signing Day came around, I really didn't have a home per se to actually go and sign with. So luckily, my parents, who are actually one of the few who did not go to an HBCU within my family, they had some ties with Nicholls State, which was right down the road from my hometown of Napoleonville, Louisiana. So I ended up, getting on with Nicholls State and whatnot. I was there for a year and a half. I mean, things were good. Winning a Southland Conference championship was also happening the same year as Hurricane Katrina happened. So, even though we had bad situations in South Louisiana, that was one of the positives that were going on sports-wise. But there were just a few personal things that I was kind of looking towards that I wanted to do more, and I really could not do it where I was at. So I started doing a lot of praying, started talking to several family members and whatnot, and I announced that I was going to go ahead and seek a transfer. I looked at various schools, had some interest from two MEAC schools, another school in the SWAC, and a SIAC school, but it ended up happening. The funniest thing is that one of my good friends since middle school, Pee Wee football almost, named Cleavon White, he was playing football at Southern University, and I happened to run into him over a weekend. We were just kind of talking about some stuff. He was like, Mo, what are you going to do, man? I know you're kind of in limbo and whatnot. And I actually told him I did not know what was going on. So he was like, well, look, I'm on with Southern, and I can talk to some of the coaches to see what's going on. So he ends up actually putting in a good word for me with Coach Pete Richardson. And afterwards, Coach Rich ended up talking to his defense coordinator, Terrence Graves. And, those guys were coaches when, throughout, of course, at the beginning of the 90s with Southern's dominance and whatnot during the SWAC. But they also knew several folks that I knew who knew me and family and whatnot. I ended up getting a phone call, got called up like, hey, we're interested in you. Of course, you'd have to sit out because of transfer rules. And I came up there that summer. And once I got to Southern University, it really, really felt like it was at home, which is interesting because I basically grew up going to Southern University games, traveling with multiple family members and whatnot. I mean, I mentioned that my parents went to Nicholls State. They probably would have went to Southern. Here's what happened. When they were coming out of high school, a lot of the public universities in the state of Louisiana were going through desegregation. So they were really, really big on giving minority scholarships. So that's how my parents ended up at Nicholls State, along with an uncle and aunt of mine as well. But a large majority of my family went to Southern. For some reason, I got a few people decide to go to Grambling. I don't know why. I just, I still love them. I just don't like them on Thanksgiving weekend for the Bayou Classic. But besides that, things have been going great. But Southern University, it's definitely been in my blood for many, many years. I mean, I've had several relatives who played on the football team, especially under Coach P. Richardson. I grew up going to games, tailgating, traveling, doing various things. So you can just imagine whenever I told folks like, hey, I'm going to be transferring to Southern and actually playing football, you just can't imagine how happy and hyped they were. So everybody was getting all their number 21 Carter jerseys and pictures and T-shirts and all that going. And, once I got there, I mean, I really did feel like I was at home. I wasn't too far away from home as well, Baton Rouge to Napoleonville. It's about an hour or in some change. And, I enjoyed it. I got a chance to do some work in radio at one of the local radio stations during my time there, and did some television work as far as internships. And a lot of things eventually fell into place to where I actually am. I think one of my biggest achievements, though, was I just got a chance to do ESPN's Campus Connection, ESPNU's Campus Connection week stuff, which you still see them continuously do. And back when BET was doing the Black College Tour, I was actually able to be the host for whenever they came to Southern, and had a commercial I was running nationwide. But all those good things to say that those were just some of the few highlights that I enjoyed during my time trying to get to Southern and being at Southern, and now to it is. I tell people all the time, Southern, three things: a great education, it was a great opportunity to play football, and it's also where I met my lovely wife as well.
There you go. So, yeah, I imagine when you announced to a lot of your family that you were going to Southern, I'm sure there were a lot of, well, it's about time. It's about time, Mo.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. I even had a great uncle who was like, you should have went there from the beginning, but
right.
You know how that was. But, sometimes you have to go through go through the valley before you can get back up to the peak.
So I'm curious, was Southern one of the schools, were they involved in your recruitment process, or were you looking at them, or were you looking past them? What was it like early on as you were being recruited, as you were going through the recruitment process a decade plus ago?
There was some interest. I can't ever say there was like a full offer, but there was some interest because there were several guys that I played against in high school who, who they were at those games and saw me performing as well. As a matter of fact, perfect example, everybody knows Jarvis Landry, who now plays for the Cleveland Browns, and he had played at played at LSU. Well, I played against Jarvis's older brother, Gerard Landry, in high school. I went to Assumption High School. He went to Lutcher High School. Well, Gerard ended up going to Southern, and it's crazy that by the time, I transferred there, we got talking, and it was like, dude, remember when we played against each other? And, it's like all kind of things. But, that's one of the guys I remember playing against in high school that I ended up playing with in college. And then the buddy of mine that I told you, Cleveland, that went to high school with me and was playing, Cleveland would always throw the little shade at him, talking about, man, look, y'all may have beat us, but Mo got 2 interceptions on you compared to your 1 touchdown on him. He always would throw that in there, which is always fun. And of course, now it's been almost a decade now since we played. And actually, I saw, we got together sometime last year. And of course, what did Cleveland do? He did the same thing. But going back to the original question, I mean, like I said, there was some interest, but unfortunately, it just wasn't in the mix and fold. And of course, recruiting when I was coming through high school is a lot different than what it is now. And granted, I only graduated from high school 15 years ago. Around the time I was coming out of high school, Rivals.com was really just getting their start. And, but I remember it was more of a regional thing. So they were ranking the guys who were regionally based. You may get a top 10 or whatever out of a state. Nowadays, you can get like a top 100 out of the state. So, yeah, you may get a top 10 out of the state. And, also back then, I remember the 7-on-7 stuff was just starting to come to light. Now, all that's mandatory. You know, you go to 7-on-7 camp, that's where you get recruited. That's where you do this. That's where you do that. So, like I said, I'm going to say I was probably at a disadvantage. If I had a lot of the things that they're going now, it might have been a real different story. But at the end of the day, I just had to just go the way it was.
Right. And so as you – and one of the questions that has kind of come to mind here, as you think about the transition from Nicholls State to playing in the SWAC, and then as you think about the SWAC now, and as you cover all the major colleges, of course, in Alabama, and even the FCS schools in Alabama, and you deal with the high school recruiting, have you seen anything change in the perception of whether it be Southern SWAC football or black college football in general from – if you think back over 15 years, obviously from your time as a recruit to transferring to what you see now, has the perceptions improved or they're about the same? What are your thoughts on that?
I think the perception has definitely improved, more so especially over the last couple of years. Of course, all kind of people have their reasoning why, you know, a great, especially African-American athlete will go to a Power 5 school, or they'll go to an FCS school over having a full ride to like an HBCU or something. Of course, they have their reasons. Sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't. I mean, I know lots of times we see a lot of kids here in Alabama, you know, whether let's say Coach Connell Manor offers them a full ride to come to Alabama A&M, or back like when I worked in Montgomery, I also did work for Alabama State with their play-by-play. Same situation. You may get a kid who may get a full ride from Alabama State to Alabama A&M, and everything's cool, but then all of a sudden, here comes a Troy. Here comes a South Alabama. Here comes a Troy South or a UAB. And unfortunately, our HBCUs may get beat out over that because the first thing those student athletes will see will be, oh, it's a bigger school, more exposure. But sometimes that narrative is technically not correct. I mean, of course, you know, I've grown up in the SWAC. I've seen a lot of things. I have a really good relationship with the new commissioner, Dr. Charles McClellan. And the visions that he has for the university are just astounding and astronomical to where everything is actually working out perfectly. I mean, you take a look at like the SWAC, for instance. Okay, from top to bottom, you've got some very, very competitive. You've got some very, 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 very competitive schools. I mean, Southern University, Grambling State University, Alcorn State. I mean, you know, those three have kind of been the bell cow on things. But here's another thing. Okay, they get the exposure that the SWAC provides or whatever. They'll play a big team from time to time. But then here's another thing. Okay, if like you're Southern or Grambling, you know for sure you're guaranteed to be playing in front of 70,000 people inside the Mercedes-Benz Superdome every Thanksgiving weekend for the Bayou Classic. Then the SWAC championship is the following week. And one thing I love that Dr. McClellan did last year was move it to the campus. We found out what the financial records were for that, and it was amazing. Alcorn State actually earned close to $1 million last year for being able to host the SWAC championship because they were able, of course, to keep a majority of ticket sales and concessions, also parking, and then ESPN cut them a check because that game is televised. So you look at it like that, that's almost $1 million. And then when you go to the Celebration Bowl, that was another $1 million in their pockets. So when you think about it, that's just football as a whole. So imagine once you find that out, you know, if you're another university within the SWAC saying, hey, if they can do it and we work hard, we can do the same thing too. So there are definitely benefits from that lots of times either I may have to have a conversation with somebody, and I'm not sure, honestly, if recruiting for a coach, they will actually be able to tell them that. They may be able to, like, in general, and, like, also not really maybe not so much in general, but, like, go in depth about that or whatever. I mean, let me use Alabama A&M, for example. Okay, like this past year, okay, if you were somebody who's on Alabama A&M football team, you're playing with Coach Connell Manor, a guy who has a very strong track record as a player in college, as a player in arena football leagues, who won like a couple of arena bowls. He's been a great coach. Okay, you get down here, you follow his plan or whatever, you make the travel squad, opening weekend, you're playing in Canton, Ohio. at the Pro Football Hall of Fame Black College Football Classic, and I had a chance to travel with them, which I thought was like a phenomenal experience. But not only was it a phenomenal experience for me, there was a lot of guys who never had been on
probably
an
never
airplane
been to Ohio, or an airplane, right, exactly.
Exactly. And, the looks on the guys' faces when they're walking through the Pro Football Hall of Fame, they're looking at the records that were broken, they're looking at the bust of guys like Emmitt Smith and Mel Blount, and then a lot of them were really, really excited when they saw John Stallworth, who's the only Alabama A&M alum to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, even though I think Robert Mathis has a really good chance to get there in the next couple of years. They were really, really, really excited. And then all of a sudden, Mel Blount shows up later on that night to come talk to them. And Coach Maynard was able to hook the video screen up, and they showed some old school Mel Blount highlights where he was body slamming people. And it was just like, man, that was you?
We can't get away with that. This stuff you can't get away with these days, guys. So,
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And he made it known because of people like me is why you have now the 5-yard illegal contact rule after.
Right.
So, you look at it like that, and you get an opportunity to play in those things. And, I know a lot of people will try to discredit HBCU sports, but until you've actually been a part of it, until you actually lived it, I feel like nobody should really make their opinions about that. A lot of questions like, why does Southern and Grambling never ever try to go to the FCS playoffs? And, of course, by me living it as a fan and then playing in it, totally understand. A lot of it has to do with a paycheck. You go into the FCS playoffs, you really don't make that much money. A lot of FCS teams who make their run, with the exception of maybe North Dakota State or James Madison, they don't break even. They
they're losing money.
Don't.
Right.
They are losing money because I know the NCAA takes so much of the ticket sales and concessions and parkings. They provide travel, which is always good. But imagine if they didn't do that, they really, really would be in the hole on that. But you look at it like a Southern and Grambling, who I think especially on good years because of the contract with NBC and various other things happening in the city of New Orleans, they're easily walking away with close to $1 million each for the school, and the football program reaps the benefit of that. So you look at if you do Bayou Classic, then you do SWAC Championship and Celebration Bowl, it's like you're coming on top, financially great, and you also are being televised on national TV. Yes, I do know nowadays we've got ESPN3 and we've got all these other digital platforms, which I think are great, but not everybody has those things. Not everybody has cable. A lot of people are cutting the cord. But guess what? If you have those main channels, bam, there it is. So, that's why I always kind of tell people, I don't try to make them feel stupid or nothing. But I'm a guy that's about the facts about it. Now, granted, I know sometimes competition-wise, when you see an HBCU going against the PWI, especially on the FCS level, sometimes those PWIs do get the upper hand. I know sometimes it could be a facilities thing. Sometimes it could be just a coaching thing. It just happens. But when you get down to the nitty-gritty and you're fighting for the conference championship and you're doing this, you're doing that, and getting a way to get to a Celebration Bowl for football, I guess in the end that's kind of what matters, for those students, especially who are participating as HBCU student athletes.
Right. Well, yeah, I firmly one of the things that I've been sort of observing, or just really, and I'm hoping more schools will do this, if you look at the attendance numbers on the FCS level, and I've come to a realization that if you're not in the top 65, maybe top 70 of the FBS, then really you're on the outside looking in. And really at that point, everybody's on the outside looking in. I'm talking the rest of the lower half of the FCS. I'm talking, or FBS, the second half of the FBS. Then you got all of the FCS looking on the outside, D2, D3. Everyone's looking at what they're doing, and you know what? Hey, that's great. Let that be its own thing. The Power 5, or I don't know if you want to say Power 6, let them be their own thing, because it is their own thing. They're not sharing their money with anybody. But once you get outside of that, who's the next most popular and most watched and most attended group of games? I find it hard. You can go on a week-to-week basis, and you'll find that probably out of the top 5, top 10 attended games on the FCS level, it's an HBCU game. It's a game like
absolutely.
you were at the Magic City Classic. I mean, this year it may have been short of 50 because of the weather, but normally there's 50, 60,000 there. You're going to have
exactly. And that's just insane. You got another 40 that's outside tailgating.
Right. Every weekend somebody is putting up 20-something plus thousand. I mean, what Southern's homecoming was what? What was 21,000 this past weekend?
I think it was about 22, maybe 23.
Inside the stadium. Like you said, inside the stadium, and then probably another 30, 40 outside.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, of course, I traveled with Alabama A&M for that game, killing two birds with one stone, covering A&M, but also celebrating my alma mater's homecoming. And as I'm walking around with some of the A&M folks, they were just in amazement because they were like, "Is this Magic City Classics all over again?" And I'm like, "If you want to look at it like that, then sure." And another person was like, "Dude, this is one school though that's doing all this."
Yes.
And they were amazed with the hospitality and the surroundings, and just the fact that, look, it is homecoming, it's a great gathering, and they were definitely loving it from a top to bottom. And I'll say this too: if the game was a little later, let it have been like a 6 or 7 o'clock, you would have easily got 29,000 in there easily. But I think the 4 o'clock kick is kind of holds them back from getting the full attendance, because on homecoming day to get on Southern's campus it's insane. It reminds you of Atlanta and LA traffic trying to get through the few spots that they are to actually get on campus. Once you get on campus, you're good. It's just sometimes it does hold you back. But no, I totally get what you're saying on the attendance thing. I mean, you look at the Magic City Classic, you look at the Bayou Classic. Let's see something else. The Florida Classic between Cookman and Florida A&M always draws well. And also just depending on certain spots, certain games. I know Jackson State and Tennessee State always draws well out in Memphis. Several years ago when Southern played Florida A&M, let's do the Southern Florida A&M game was packed this year on campus. I'm glad to see.
Yeah, 27,000 something on campus, right.
Yeah, and I remember a couple of years ago when they played in Atlanta, the first year they had 59,000, and the second year was 49,000. And granted, you got to think if the Marching 100 would have not been in the trouble that they were probably matched or clipped that number.
Mm-hmm.
So
and I think Jackson State had a couple of games this past year where they drew 30-something thousand. I think the game against Grambling a few weeks back might have drawn 30-something thousand. So, the numbers are there. And I guess in saying that it's great that, and what I'm hoping is that more schools will continue to partner with media outlets and it seems that you have a great relationship with the Alabama A&M sports information and the athletic department and the coaches, and that they're utilizing not only just they're doing their own thing, but they're utilizing the local media markets to help. It's like this day and age, we have the ability to broadcast our product nationally, globally, even instead of just being a regional or state thing. Everybody, even the small schools at Division II, you have an opportunity now to promote your product and your brand to a global audience. And it's like more. That's what I'm a big advocate of. I just want more schools to do that. Talk a little about what's the relationship that you have with Alabama A&M, for example. I mean, you've had some. I'll tell you what I really love. I love the fact that your broadcast. I was just looking at a couple packages online. You guys are doing 4, 5, 6 minute highlight packages, which I'm not gonna lie. I keep looking back and say, is this a news station that's doing 4-minute highlight packages on a HBCU game? I mean, that is amazing. Talk a little bit about the relationship that you guys and your network and you kind of help build with Alabama A&M.
Okay, so I'll get to that one in a second. As far as the whole highlights thing, we have a Sunday night sports show called Sports Extra, so we've got 30 minutes to fill for content. So luckily during the football season, it is easy to fill, especially like this past weekend. You didn't have an Alabama didn't play, so that'd be like one chunk that we would usually have that we didn't have. But I was like, hey, you know what? I'm traveling with Southern and Alabama A&M this weekend. I'll definitely make sure we'll get that in place. I'll make sure that I have a pretty good package, rolling. Because like I said, you've got to find a way to fill the content, from top to bottom. I mean, we've got enough teams that we cover to fill the content. I mean, between Alabama, Auburn, Alabama A&M, University of North Alabama, which is also in our DMA right down the road in Florence, and then we also have Jacksonville State, which is on the fringe of our viewing area as well. We've got a lot of local talent that plays there, so that always helps when they send us stuff over. But as far as my relationship with Alabama A&M, it really kind of balls back to whenever I first got into the business. When I first started working for WAFB, Channel 9 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, my mentor, Steve Schneider, he and the rest of the folks who were still in the sports department, actually 2 out of the 3 people I used to work with are still there, Steve and Jock. You say one thing they did tell me was that through their years that they learned is that you should always put local first, no matter what it is. You're going to have always your fans who are going to tune in regardless, but it's those local fans who should draw the most, who will be the ones that you always need to draw into that. So I definitely took that in consideration as I extended my career. I mean, Steve Snyder was somebody that I basically call my TV dad. There's another guy who is very, very prominent within the HBCU broadcasting field. That's a guy named James Verrett. I grew up watching James. Nowadays, you can see James doing a lot of the SIAC game of the weeks that are usually coming on ESPN3 and some Flow Sports stuff as well. James kind of incorporated that same stuff too, because he kind of was the Southern University beat person for like the long time when he was there. But I was always thought about utilizing your local stuff. So when I went to Alexandria, Louisiana, of course, in the state of Louisiana, you're always gonna make sure that you get the Saints and you get LSU covered always. Right. But depending on where you are, you have to build those fan bases. When I was in Alexandria, Louisiana, with a Division III school right there, Louisiana College, and I mean, don't get me wrong, like it's a real small school, but they've got great athletic programs. Their softball team is ranked nationally every year. Their football team is usually up in the fold, up in the mix. I know that they've never been able to win a conference championship, at least in the last decade, because they're in the same conference as Division III power Mary Hart Baylor. But we got a chance to actually check out some of those unique games against them. So you do things like that. Division I wise, we had Northwestern State, which is right up the road in Natchitoches, Louisiana. So we had I made some great I made great relationships with all those individuals, and then of course they recognize my work. Whether it's, hey, we're going to tune in tonight, or we're going to retweet your stuff on social media, or we're going to follow you or like it or share, doing those things. And then once I really kind of got into the fold and into the mix, I started realizing that there were a lot of alums from various universities in central Louisiana. So Grambling probably is about an hour and 20 away from Alexandria, give or take, straight up US 165 or 167, one of the two. So I started building my relationships with the Shreveport and Monroe station. Hey, you guys shooting Grambling today? Send me something. I'll put it on my web. I'll put it on this. Same thing, I still have a relationship with the Southern folks, so we had a Southern Alum Association there. Hey, you can send me something? Cool. Go ahead and do that. So, you build those things. Then by the time I got to Montgomery, I utilized those same tactics when I got to Montgomery. I made sure that Alabama and Auburn was going to be taken care of, but then I had Alabama State. I had Tuskegee. I had Troy. So we were making sure we were covering all our bases, and at the end of the day, we were still putting our local sports first. And when I got to Alabama, I realized that, okay, no matter what, Alabama and Auburn fans, they're going to tune in. But depending on where you are, you need to find a way to build that viewership with those other local folks. So I was able to help build the viewerships for our athletic coverage of Troy, Tuskegee, Alabama State, and doing those things. And now, I'm here in Huntsville, and I've basically done the same thing. Our major difference is instead of Alabama, Auburn, Troy, Alabama State, and Tuskegee, now it's Alabama, Auburn, Alabama A&M, University of Alabama at Huntsville, which is a Division II team, North Alabama, and, of course, Jacksonville State. So, you do these things. The athletic department in Alabama A&M, I have a really good relationship with the folks who are there. I mean, whether they're a coach that was in the fold when I got here or it was somebody that got hired. I mean, Coach Connell Maynard, the day he got leading up to his hiring, I kind of was really the only local person that was on who's going to be Alabama A&M's head coach. And granted, when you build relationships with people on the inside or whatever, which I found out was still like public information, I found out who they were targeting. I found out who was an individual that they really wanted. I know Robert Prunty, the current coach at Hampton, who played at Alabama A&M, he was interested in the job, but some things just didn't work out. So when I found out he was hired by Hampton, I called up my affiliate that's in the Virginia Beach area, got them to send me some video like, hey, he's off the list now. And then once I found out Coach Maynard was, I'm like, all right, hey, Coach Maynard being hired. I was the first person to break that locally. And then whenever he got hired, and I was at his press conference, I did my interviews, and I talked to him. I was like, hey, if you need anything, let me know. I love to do a lot of stuff with you. And then with him being from the Winston, with having ties to North Carolina, he knew my former coach, Pete Richardson, very, very well. He knew some other coaches of mine very, very well. It's like you just build those relationships and just on fun times. And people acknowledge and know what you actually do. I mean, I know sometimes people go like, well, all he has the A&M stuff on. And like, no, that's not true. You may see a lot of A&M stuff posted on our website. I mean, I do just as much Alabama and Auburn stuff. The only thing is that lots of times we can't put that Alabama and Auburn stuff on our website. So because we can't do that, we have to put things that actually that can populate the website that are illegal. I mean, I've seen the emails from the SEC saying, hey, you can put practice footage up there, but you can't put game footage up there. Totally understand.
Oh, so really you have certain restrictions. There's certain restrictions that prevent you from putting SEC games or SEC highlights on. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, you cannot put SEC. You cannot put any SEC highlights, whether it's TV or it's something you shot, on a website. It's similar to they follow the rules similar to not putting, like, if you had NFL highlights or NBA highlights, like, you can't put those on websites unless you buy the license. I know my TV station ain't about to do that. So you can basically air it. You can basically air it during whatever multiple broadcasts, but in terms of like a supplemental site or something like that, you can't do that. Correct. Let me go ahead and give you a perfect example. Okay, so let's Tua Tagovailoa currently right now we're trying to figure out if he's going to play Saturday or not for Alabama. Okay, every story I've used with Tua Tagovailoa, I have used practice footage we've had of him because that practice footage is something we can put on the website. But if I would have went and put the footage of him getting hurt against Tennessee, that's illegal, according to the SEC rules. And those rules have been in place for about a decade or so. And it's really unique how different people approach it. I know some stations, like let's say somebody has a package and they need to put something in it, they may go to like Getty Images or something and find like a picture of like when Tua was getting hurt and then start to zoom in on it or whatever, just in case they need to put it in, and then that's how they get it on. So yeah, you still got to follow the rules and regulations, but just sometimes there's just certain things we just can't put on, and that's why we try to populate it the best we can. But when some things out of your hands, they're just out of your hands on that. So the coverage is there, you just may not see it on the website, and hey, you might just have to set your DVR,
Which then opens the door for schools like Alabama A&M or Alabama State, or even, as you mentioned, North Alabama. It opens the door for them because, I mean, they're not going to be – they shouldn't be restrictive. It's like, hey, please, put whatever highlights of our game you want to put on the website. All the better for us.
Correct. So, that's how I've kind of worked that trick in my favor, and I think it's actually worked out great. Now, there are some things we can kind of get around, like let's say we actually wanted to put highlights somewhere. There's no restriction for us putting the highlight, like directly putting the video highlights on Facebook or putting it on Twitter with our logo. So nobody does, so if somebody wants to steal it, they got to find a good way to, to put, change the watermark or something. So we do that from time to time, and it gets pretty good traction. But other times too, you don't want to beat the dead horse because I mean, lots of times people have already seen those highlights. That's why I said that, like, there's a lot of things that you don't see on there's a lot of things that you'll see on local television from your Power 5 schools that you would not find, that you would find also on SportsCenter or on SEC networks.
Yeah, I
about that.
Well, I know. Look, I know I know I want to get into a deeper discussion on just the media and their role in terms of black college athletics and sports, and just I'm sure you've got a lot of thoughts and perspectives just from things you've seen. But I know your time is limited, so I don't want to take up too much of it. But I wanted to get into Alabama A&M. Obviously, they're right there in your backyard. You watched this team from the beginning of the season. I think in our preseason predictions, when we kind of did our preseason thing, I'm trying to see, they're in the East right there with Alcorn. I thought this might be a year that they could overcome Alcorn, and that they had obviously I think they've got the best pure passing quarterback in the league in Akil Glass. But it seems like as I go and look at the season and think of the season, it's been an up and down. They really, outside of a little 2-game win streak that they had against I think it was Central State and it was somebody Texas Southern, exactly. They really haven't been able to put 2 consecutive wins. They haven't lost 2 games in a row, but they haven't been able to put a good streak together. What's your thought on this team, especially as you watch them the last 3 weeks? With Southern, the Magic City Classic, Grambling. This is the 4th week of a tough 5-game stretch. What is your thought on Alabama A&M right now as you see them?
So one thing I'll say about Alabama A&M is that I actually feel that they're probably like a year ahead of schedule as far as like where Coach Maynard wants the program at. He knew when he came in that there was talent, but he was probably still going to have to change the guard, do some more discipline and things of that nature. And, of course, last year I think they probably overachieved, to be honest with you, getting the first winning season in several years. I think they definitely did overachieve. This year the pressure was there a little bit to be a competitor. And don't get me wrong, they've been in some games. There have been some games that they should have not lost either. I can use Arkansas Pine Bluff game. They made several mistakes against Pine Bluff, and Pine Bluff took advantage of it fully. And, Pine Bluff, was able to pick up a big victory over them. Now, granted, I think Pine Bluff has now kind of fizzled out a little bit ever since then, but at the time, Pine Bluff used that victory as something to catapult them through the rest of the season. But, there's just been certain times where just little mistakes would really be something that's been detrimental to the product on the field. Now, defensive-wise, I kind of do feel for that defense because you're looking at it like this. In 3 years, the guys who've been playing on this defense have been in 3 different systems. 2 years ago, they were in a system under Travis Pearson, who's now the defensive coordinator down at Alabama State. And his last year, actually, Alabama A&M had a top 5 defense within the SWAC. But then whenever Coach Maynard came in, Pearson actually was held on, but then Alabama State made a lucrative offer to him that he couldn't pass up. Plus, I think he's from the Montgomery area, so it was kind of something he just couldn't pass up, and, totally understand that. So then Maynard brings in DeBastiani, who put together a great defensive scheme. Things were going well. I think Alabama A&M finished like 2nd overall in total defense last year, several all-SWAC performers. But then you get into the money game, and DeBastiani got an offer from Central Michigan. He got an offer from Central Michigan. The former Florida coach, Jim McElwain, who he coached under prior, picked them up for a defensive position. So afterwards, they ended up going get, another former head coach as their defensive coordinator in Granville Eastman. And Coach Maynard remembers him from going head-to-head with Granville when Granville was at North Carolina Central and Maynard was at Hampton. And don't get me wrong, I think Coach Eastman is probably one of the better defensive minds within HBCU football. But like I said, you literally go from you literally go from a 4-3 to a 3-4, now to a 4-2-5. That's 3 different schemes that defensive players have had to get used to. So I can say the defense, they've shown improvement through the year, but that's a lot. I mean, I'm a former defensive back, and I know for sure that if I had to deal with something like that, it's going to take some time, and it's just, still going to take a while. So inconsistency on the defense, I definitely know has been costly for the Bulldogs. But in retrospect, they have shown up and they have shown out. I mean, Akil Glass, like you said, he's a SWAC leading passer, definitely the best pure pocket passer, and he makes plays. He's made plays when he definitely needs to make plays, and then he's got a workhorse in the backfield in Jordan Bentley, who's been definitely a workhorse on it. I find the interest in Alabama A&M actually is a unique squad because, most teams run the ball instead of the pass. Well, A&M kind of does the opposite. They kind of want to pass well, and then they want to use Bentley to run it down your throat. And that was the example that happened at the Magic City Classic. I mean, Akil Glass had, I think, over 250 yards and a couple of touchdowns, but late in the third quarter, early fourth quarter, especially after it stopped raining, man, they just kept giving it to Bentley. Bentley rushed the ball for like 37 times for like 197 yards, if I'm not mistaken, in that Magic City Classic. And let's say this, so 3 overtimes, so 3 possessions. Let's say they had 13 plays in overtime roughly. Bentley must have touched the ball at least 10 of those 13.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, he just ran the ball down the throat of Alabama State, and and that's something that you have seen and been accustomed to, which is great because he had a great freshman year. He got nicked up his sophomore year, just kind of had his highs and lows his junior year. So his senior year, he's out here, doing very, very well, and also a very, very smart kid too. He's an engineering major, honor roll student. So Coach Manners always said, like, hey, if I had 11 more like him, he'd run the world, kind of giving that speech all the time as well. But as far as Alabama A&M as a whole, like I said, you see a team that they're hungry. They're there. They're hungry. They know things are there for the taking, but it's just certain little things that they still need to work on to kind of get over that next step. I mean, they had Southern on the ropes, and if you look at my recap package, the face mask call late in the fourth quarter that negated a touchdown, and then Akil Glass taking a sack on the last play of the game when they were down to the 26-yard line. I mean, those are 2 things. If it goes the opposite way, we're talking about a different situation where Alabama A&M is still controlling their destiny in the East with 3 important games left on their schedule against against Jackson State, Alcorn, and Mississippi Valley. So, like I said, the team is there. The competitiveness is there. It's just now Manor just has to find a way to eventually, get these guys to become champions. And, of course, that takes some time. I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day. But also, too, I'll say this. The SWAC this is probably the best as far as parity I've seen in the SWAC in a long, long time. I mean, you're in November and you still have, 4 teams, I think, really still in the running? If you think about it, I mean, Alcorn and Jackson both control their own destiny. Alabama A&M technically is still in it, even though they need some help. And then that's just on the East. On the West, you still got Southern and Grambling.
Right.
So you're talking about with 3 weeks left, you got 5 teams still in the fold. So, I mean, if that's not parity, I don't know what that is. So, I mean, I think they're moving in the right direction. It just so happens that the SWAC is getting stronger as a whole, too. So it's just an adjustment thing. But, I mean, one thing I will say, though, is that Bulldog fans here, they're really, really excited about Coach Manor because they know he means business. He's at these different events, talking to people. He's at these different events. He's greeting people. He's talking to people or whatever. He's not making guarantees, but he's like, look, you're going to be proud of this football team, but I need your support because if you don't come out and support me, then what are you going to be proud of? Like, he gives those things. He gives those models. He gives those. So, and he does well with certain things within the community, which I think is very great for the program. So they're moving in the right direction. I think it's still just out of the time. And, of course, during SWAC Media Day, he said that in order for them to be able to compete, they got to beat the big 3. That's Alcorn, Southern, and Grambling. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to beat 2 of those 3, but they do have Alcorn coming up next week. But the matters at hand that this week they got to take care of Jackson State. And I will give Coach props, too, on the fact that he had a team who just had an emotional victory over Alabama State. Historically, the teams who win and lose in the Magic City Classic get that emotional victory, and then I'm not going to say they quit on the season, but it takes a lot out of them, and then the following week either they're caught off guard or they just don't play well. So I have to give Coach Maynard and the staff a lot of props on, explaining to them that, hey, the Magic City Classic was good. We got the victory. We beat the arch rival or whatever. Let's celebrate it. But when Monday we need to focus on Southern, we need to focus on what's at hand because, they were in that game literally and still had a chance with 4 seconds to go to possibly beat the reigning Western Division champions. And Coach Odoms, he and Coach Maynard know each other from the days in North Carolina. And, he said in his press conference that Coach Maynard has a good football team. They just happen to make one more play than what the Bulldogs did in the end. So still a lot of bright side in front of Alabama A&M, but, of course, you have to play the game on the football field. And I'm hoping to see them in the mix and in the fold, but, we have to just wait and see playing on that. But they're definitely in a good spot compared to where it had been for several years.
Right. And so I wanted to just briefly, you mentioned you thought that they were ahead of schedule this particular season. And I know last season they dealt with the self-imposed ban in dealing with some of those issues from last year. And I thought, and you can maybe clarify some things on this, if I recall correctly, there are definitely some future sanctions or reductions in scholarships coming in the future, but they didn't really affect like this year or last year's. Like they almost had a reprieve for a couple of seasons before some of those sanctions happened. And so I originally, we talked about it on our podcast as to whether we thought that might affect Connell Maynard's status at Alabama A&M. And I got no indication that, he's thinking about anywhere else other than where he's at, that he's in a good place. But what can you so as you think about them being sort of ahead of schedule and then the pending future of those reduced scholarships, is there like a window for winning or getting to the SWAC championship that really almost lives with Akil Glass and his time at Alabama A&M?
I'll say this. The day that the sanctions and stuff happened, my weekend sports anchor, Charity Chambers, was all over it. She was actually one of the only ones that was actually at practice. Asked Coach Maynard, did he even know about this before he took the job? He said no, but he did assure that he was going to be the Bulldogs coach for as long as he saw fit on that. One good thing, though, that came out of the NCAA thing, that it was more of a, hey, you keep appealing. All right, now we got to do something. So then polls had happened. Luckily, during that time period, A&M had already started to take the strides as far as knowing, like, hey, stuff may hit the fan. So, they really weren't working with the full complement of scholarships through the last couple of years to kind of dictate that pace as well. So technically that really hasn't been too big of a deal. Last year was the only – of course they're on probation or whatever, but like last year was the only year they were restricted from going to the postseason or, doing any other thing in general with the NCAA implications. Now, of course, like I said, I think they still have to kind of, keep the upstanding maintenance that the NCAA wants them to do. So the NCAA is going to check in and they're going to sit there and do their job. But as far as Alabama A&M, they actually had already taken the steps in the program. Of course, smart coaches know how to do different things. They got some players that I know who are making contributions that actually may not be there on athletic scholarship, or may not be there on a full athletic scholarship because they got a great academic record. And great academic record. They got more scholarship. I know that's what Coach Richardson did when I was at Southern. There was a lot of dudes. Of course, they were on athletics, but then I look at a couple of like my teammates who were like engineering majors and a couple of people with nursing majors or whatever. And they were there academically, and that allowed the coaching staff to spread the scholarship stuff around to get to other points and factors to help out with the actual future on that. So I think they've kind of already jumped on that. The main thing is this: as long as A&M does well and does what they're supposed to do as far as APR, they're going to be totally fine. I mean, I want to say there was one program, technically from the last school season, who probably didn't meet the standard that the APR was looking for, but like everybody else across the board, not just football, literally made leaps and bounds as far as like what they needed to, where they need to be at, and also be an exceeding aspect. So the future is definitely bright for A&M as long as Maynard wants to stay here. I mean, I get a chance to talk to his wife from time to time at certain games. She said she really, really likes it here. I just know that the only thing that kind of keeps in my back of my mind is like, what if Coach Washington at North Carolina A&T ever retires? You know, Maynard's an A&T grad. His daughter goes to North Carolina A&T. I always wonder whatever happened with that. You know, I always do wonder whatever happened with that. I mean, I'm sure Southern fans were probably in the same situation last year. I mean, Dawson Odom is a North Carolina Central alum, and you see what he did with the Southern. Yeah, he's a Central alum. And, you know, Central had a head coaching position open last year, and it was interesting to see if they were going to go after him. What was funny, though, is that they actually went after one of his assistants, and now he's the head coach at North Carolina Central. But, you know, those things happen. They really, really do. So I always have in my back of the mind that, like, if A&T would you know, and be needed a head coach, would Coach Maynard go for that? It's always that question, which also makes me wonder, you know, would Alabama A&M try to match it, or would they just be like, well, look, we know we've lost them, and that's, you know, those are some things that honestly I couldn't answer. I'd have to be, you know, in athletic administration to kind of figure that out moving forward. But those are always those what ifs, and you just don't see that on our level. You see that, well, I say our level, the FCS level. You see that on the big time stage too. I mean, a couple of years ago when Nick Saban lost Kirby Smart to Georgia, I remember when they made the announcement that week. I was at the press conference for the SEC championship, and somebody asked Coach Saban, like, what does Kirby Smart mean to your program? And Saban got a little choked up because he's like, man, I know how good this guy is. He's been working my defense for years, and he's going to be a great head coach. And what is that? Right. You know, Kirby Smart has had Georgia in the top, you know, as a top-ranked team the last couple of years, had them to the national championship. A couple of years, if it wasn't for a guy named Tua Tagovailoa who came in overtime and threw a touchdown pass, Kirby Smart in Georgia would have a national championship right now when you think about it. And, of course, Kirby made the move because he knew it was time for him to get under Nick's watch, but he was also a Georgia grad. So at the end of the day, you know, those things do happen. But as far as Coach Maynard, from what I know in the relationship I have with Coach Maynard, he likes where he's at. He likes the players he has. He likes the staff that he has. It's just a matter of just what happens in the future. I mean, he's got a program that he's trying to build as a contender and also build into a champion, but he also understands that he's also has to go against the likes of Alcorn with Coach McNair, and, you know, Jackson State continues to get good. You know, he knows that. But one thing I do like about Coach Maynard, he's one of those guys where he knows his team is always up for the challenge. It's just up to him to get them ready for the challenge. I mean, he's a competitor, man. He is a competitor.
Oh yeah, I've seen it, and definitely that I do know that for sure. So look, let me get you out of here on this. I'm not going to ask you for a prediction for Alabama A&M and Jackson State. I don't want to get anybody upset with you up there in the Huntsville area. But I'll ask. So this is a home game for Alabama A&M. Obviously, as your report said, Jackson State controls their own destiny. They've won 3 games in a row. All of a sudden, what's one or two things that Alabama A&M has to do to be successful against Jackson State this upcoming weekend?
All right. What Alabama A&M has to do, let's start defensively. They've got to know what quarterback is it. Like, whenever quarterbacks come, because Jackson State, I've seen, they've used like 2 or 3 quarterbacks at a time. They have to know what the strengths and abilities of those quarterbacks are. Because, I mean, they've got a guy who is a pure passer. They've got a guy who's more of a dual threat, and they've got a guy who just loves to run the read option whenever they need to throw it in there. So they need to study the tape very, very well to know what the strengths and weaknesses of those teams, and also know that if you need to check or if you need to make the change calls on the defense, when those guys come in the game or change things up. So that's going to be one thing I noticed that they're definitely going to have to do. And I say that because you saw that happen to them against Arkansas Pine Bluff. Arkansas Pine Bluff has been using a 2-quarterback system all season long. They've got a guy who's a dual threat, and they've got a guy who's a pure pocket passer. And they kept switching them up, and Alabama A&M heads started getting blown because they were like, oh, God, like, how are we adjusting to this? So I think that's one major thing they do have to do. And another thing they also have to do, too, is that, like, you know, Jackson State has, like, really played a lot of close games this year, but those close games really haven't been too high scoring. We've seen Alabama A&M score a lot of points. So if you got into a shootout, it may work into Alabama A&M's favor on that. But then I don't want to sound cliche on saying this one, Brian, but you know they can't afford to turn over the ball in certain parts when turn over the ball in crucial times or make mistakes in crucial times. I mean, they get to the red zone, they got to find a way to score points. I mean, they got a field goal kicker who can probably knock it in from about 48 and within for sure. So I mean, dude's got a pretty good leg, and they got to just find a way to just be consistent on it. I mean, if they get a chance to get up, keep the foot on the pedal. Don't get conservative. Don't try to be lax and whatnot. Like, keep rolling with it. I mean, it's going to be a huge day for Alabama A&M in general. It's their Hall of Fame weekend. They've got a lot of people coming, you know, that'll be coming. Of course, there's also a military appreciation weekend. Huntsville, a huge military town with Redstone Arsenal, so a lot of military folks will be in for the game. And also, one of the greatest Bulldogs ever to lace up the boots will be there, and that's going to be Robert Mathis. He will be here on Saturday. Yeah,
98. I'm a Colts fan, so that's my guy. 98. Yes, sir.
Gotcha. Yeah, he'll be inducted into the Sports Hall of Fame on Friday night. As a matter of fact, my colleague Charity is actually serving as the Mr. of the ceremony for that. But, yeah, he is going to be there along with another former Bulldog, Kendrick Rogers. So they will be there Friday, and, of course, they'll be there on Saturday. We talked to Coach Manor about that, and he said he's glad that those guys will be there so his guys can see that you can come from Alabama A&M and go and do big things on the NFL level. So you got to think that's got to give you some kind of extra up and ante within your soul to be like, oh man, like I want to play well in front of this person too. And another thing, the last thing is that A&M just has to believe in themselves. They just got to find a way to believe in themselves because even though they don't control their own destiny, they still do have that outside shot. But in order to have the outside shot, they've got to win themselves first. They have to win themselves and also, of course, protect the home field on that. So as long as they don't turn over the ball and also don't make the crucial mistakes at the wrong time, they can find a way to pick up the victory because you got to understand, Jackson State, they're coming in, they're going to be hungry because Jackson State knows that in front of them, the teams they got, they win, they're in the championship. Don't get me wrong, Jackson State's got one heck of a schedule in front of them with A&M, Southern, and Alcorn coming up. So that ain't easy either.
Yeah, no, I mean, the schedule makers really knew what they were doing when they got into the middle of October going into the late November. They knew what they were doing, it seems.
Yes, late season games matter.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, look, Mo, we will have to have a part 2, maybe even a part 3, because there are definitely a bunch of other topics I would love to spend more time talking with you. You've been gracious. I don't want to take up more of your time. You probably got a show that you have to do later tonight, produce or be on air for later today.
Actually, I'm off today because I had a kind of a weird schedule situation this past week, especially with me traveling with Alabama A&M to Baton Rouge. So I had some weird off days. I'm actually off today. So, as soon as I get off the phone, which I'm probably going to run and go do a few little errands for the wife who gets home and make sure the house is all squared away and that. So, yeah, I still have other jobs to do, I guess you could say.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, like I said, definitely the next time we get a chance to talk, I want to definitely get into talking about the business of sports television and, definitely some of the things that you encounter, some of the things you do, and just, tying it into working with HBCUs and just the coverage in general. So hopefully we can find some time and schedule that in. Maybe even at the end of the season, we'll mix in a little end of the season SWAC talk as well. So I definitely want to do that for too long. So, all right, folks, that's at Mo Carter WZDX. That's where you can find him on Twitter. Of course, make sure to it's a great Twitter follow, especially whether you're a SWAC fan or not. It's a great HBCU media follow. Make sure to check out all of the videos that he posts on his Twitter feed. Go to the website, check out that. Anything I forgot there, Mo? Anything you want to plug? Anything I missed?
I think you are good on that. Like I said, I'm on Twitter at Mo Carter WZDX, and also if you want to follow my professional Facebook page, that's Mo Carter WZDX News. I mean, majority of the things you see on Twitter will also be pasted on Facebook. I will say this though, I probably get a little bit more creative on Twitter than what I actually do on Facebook. Just because sometimes it's a little bit more easier access to do certain things on Twitter compared to the professional Facebook stuff. Of course, when I'm out covering games, you'll see updates from what's going on more on Twitter than what you would on Facebook, just because I know lots of times it's easier to post something on Twitter, especially if you got limited cell service compared to Facebook on certain things. So,
right.
But yeah, for sure. I mean, if you follow either, you will definitely see lots of content. Of course, lots of HBCU content, but a lot of sports content. Every once in a while, you may see a little funny little bit here and there. I mean, right now, I think the thing I got tickled over was the little black cat that was running around the Monday Night Football game last night between the Cowboys and the Giants, and I happened to find like a few little parody Twitters that were already making fun about it. So, I probably got about 3 or 4 tweets in that.
He stole the show. That cat stole the show, literally. That cat stole the show Monday night, easily.
Oh, man, did it ever. And, of course, I have some friends who are Cowboys fans, and they were taking all these memes, talking about, the Giants had us. But then once that black cat came in, it was all us. Or like putting stuff talking about the Giants fans are blaming the black cat for stealing their momentum.
Jerry Jones brought that to New York. I'm sure somebody will put that out there as well. Thank Jerry Jones for that black cat running across the field, I'm sure.
Man, look, it may have been. I just want to know this. Will you ever get a 30 for 30 from that? And then you have to do a Jerry Jones interview?
Hey, so it's somebody's got to put it together. Somebody's got to do it. It's got to happen. Let's just see if we'll see any more cats the rest of this season, though. That'll be interesting. So, all right, Mo, I appreciate your time, man. Mo Carter again, WZDX, television in Huntsville, Alabama. This upcoming weekend, Alabama A&M hosting Jackson State, a key SWAC East showdown. Follow Mo again at Mo Carter WZDX. Mo, I appreciate your time. Thank you for taking time to talk with me and just following us and sharing our information, and we'll continue to do the same on your end. Thank you, sir.
Hey, not a problem, man. Look forward to talking to you again.
All right, take care.
It didn't. What happened was a gentleman wanted to do the Black College Sports Network in partnership with the HBCU for these black colleges.
Absolutely.
And it would have educated the Black College Sports Network. This is what he wanted to do. That would have educated a lot of black kids. Okay. That was the real reason why I got into it, was when I saw what happened with the Black College Sports Network, which
It's like a loop machine.